Hello there, my name's Vicky and this channel is called the Premature Menopause Project, and if you've stumbled on this video it might be because you've just been diagnosed, it might be because you're looking for some more information a little bit further down the line, and this is what I'm here to hopefully help you with. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself today, about my story. It'll probably be quite a long video, but I think that's necessary so that you have all the information you need about me and about what I can do to help, and I just want to kind of talk you through what I'm hoping this channel will do, and give you some background really. So I apologise in advance that this will probably be quite a long entry, but it's something I've been thinking about for a long time. So where did this idea come from? So just to let you know a little bit about me, so I'm 27 now, and I actually went through premature menopause age 23, but I didn't realise that at the time. I was actually 26, so about a year and a half ago when I found out, which means that for 3 years of my life something was happening to me and I couldn't make sense of what was happening to me, and nobody, there was no reason for me to realise that until recently. And as I'm sure if you're sitting here watching it you realise, it's a devastating, really devastating condition which is massively under researched, massively not, that people don't seem to be aware of, and it's actually it's not really common, but it's common enough that there should be more out there on it than there is. And I have felt a general frustration ever since I've been diagnosed at how there's just nothing out there for people like me. I know that I'm one of the many people who, when they were diagnosed with premature menopause, weren't given any offer of any kind of emotional support from the NHS. I wasn't given really signposted to anywhere where I could find answers to my questions, and I didn't know anybody like me. I didn't have any friends or family that really knew what this was like or what I was going through. Like many of you will do, I do have friends that I'm aware have had fertility problems, but that's not the whole story of premature menopause, and also there were very different fertility problems to the ones that I will be experiencing. So it was very hard. I felt very isolated, and I think what added to that isolation was going online and either being completely confused by the information out there or just not being able to find anything, and I didn't want that to be the experience for the next person that comes along who's diagnosed with this. So I've been thinking about doing something about my experiences for quite some time, probably the last year, but if I'm honest, I don't think, because of where I was at with how I was feeling, I don't think I was really ready to do that yet until about a couple of months ago, when I thought actually I might be at a place where I might be able to offer some kind of support and just some kind of comfort to people that are going through the same thing. So wasn't sure what to call it. I've called it the Premature Menopause Project because I'm hoping that, although this will be something where I'll upload videos, I'm hoping it will be something that will, in my best kind of vision for this channel, it would be that it instigates a bit of a chain reaction, that other people with the condition start to record their experiences as well, that people get, through commenting and through watching, it sparks up a conversation. I have thought about starting another Facebook group, but to be honest, there are Facebook groups out there which I think are doing a really good job of supporting each other, and I'll talk about them later. So for me, it was just somewhere for people to go. People are different in what kind of information helps them. I found that YouTube is a really helpful tool for me to understand things, so I thought that for this particular thing, because it's a very personal experience, I thought that a YouTube blog would be a really good way of kind of relaying that kind of information and that kind of that stuff really. I think it would be helpful. So not that it's relevant really at all, but just so you know a bit more about me, I do have another YouTube channel which you might stumble across if you're on this page, and it's called Messy Stitcher, and that's because I'm really obsessed with cross stitch, and that's one of my hobbies. And so I had this other YouTube channel going on, obviously about a very different topic, for a really long time, and it's been an idea forming in my mind to get this YouTube channel out there, and I think now is the right time. One of the things that I need to say is that I can only speak from my own experience. I really want to make it clear that I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not anything like a qualified counsellor or anything like that. I'm just somebody that's gone through this, and I've been going through it for a year and a half. So the help that I hope I give you is meant with kindness and meant as a supportive thing, from somebody that's walked in your shoes to a certain extent. But I want you to know that, you know, you need to not take my word as gospel. There are some things that I'm sure I won't remember very accurately. There are some things I'll be wrong about because I've got the wrong end of the stick. I don't have any of the medical training that you'll need somebody to have to advise you what's best for you. But what I think I can help with is the more emotional side of it. I think that premature menopause or premature ovarian failure or primary ovarian insufficiency, or whatever you want to call it, I say premature menopause. I think it's one of those conditions in life that unfortunately somebody can't give you the full support around it unless they've really either really understand the topic well or have been through it themselves. It's not sort of a broken arm, a broken leg. This is something that has a lot of an emotional as well as physical impact on your life, and it has a ripple effect, and it's very hard to find somebody else that really understands what that's like. I don't pretend to understand everything about your particular journey. We'll be coming from slightly different situations in life. You might have very different issues as part of premature menopause that are the kind of present issues for you that might not be the same as what they are for me. And what was right for me and what helped me may not be the thing that helps you. But I can suggest, I can kind of tell you the experiences I've had. I don't want this to be a negative blog, but one of the things I'll say is I'm not going to shy away from telling you some quite hard, quite difficult feelings I've had and how it's affected me in an honest way, because one of the things that I found really frustrating when I was diagnosed is that everybody, either through just wanting to help, which fair enough, people wanted to help, or just through feeling uncomfortable or just not being very good with this kind of thing, I have felt that everybody's underlying message to me basically comes down to you need to get on with it and see the positives in life. And while that is a stage that I'm sure I will come to, and I'm starting to come to, that's not helpful when you're first diagnosed, not for me anyway. I think it's healthier to acknowledge the shit part of it and what's bad about it and what makes you annoyed and what makes you feel upset and what makes you feel depressed. I think that's a really important part of the conversation. And I don't want to leave you after these videos feeling worse than you did before, but I don't think it's going to do that. I think it's going to kind of show you that somebody else does know how bad things can get. And I'm not going to sanitize that and make things seem really upbeat when they're not, because I think that's important not to. But I hope that this channel will be a journey and that through time, me as well as yourself will get to a more positive place. But I'll be truthful, I need somewhere to vent my frustrations at a world that doesn't understand how this makes people feel. And I want you to have somewhere where you can come and hear from somebody honestly how things feel, rather than someone that's trying to put a positive spin on something that quite clearly for you at the moment is not going to feel positive. So we will get to the positive stuff, but you may find that for the first few videos it might feel a little bit grumpy, moany, but that's because I have things to say about my experience that I feel very passionate about and that I think are wrong with the way that the medical system has handled this for me, and I know that experience has been echoed in other people's lives as well. So, you know, if we don't bring awareness to this, you know, it's not gonna go away. And I think, you know, I will try to upload regularly, but I know from my cross-stitch channel that life gets in the way sometimes, and I can't promise you that it will be a certain regularity, but I will upload as often and as much as I am able to. I have a tendency to talk in quite a lot of detail, as you'll probably realise, but I won't know if you fast forward to the bits that are helpful for you. But as a general rule, I think these videos will probably be between 45 minutes and an hour each, because there's so much to say, you know, when you've been through this and when you're passionate about it, there's just so much information you want to get out there to people. I'm happy for you to ask questions. I think, you know, again, I'm not an expert, but if you want to ask me questions in the comments, I'm quite happy to be, I'm quite happy to help you and tell you what my experience has been, if that helps you. The other thing is that I think if you're going to talk about premature menopause, you need to talk about the stuff that's a bit gooey, a bit embarrassing, a bit disgusting sometimes. One of the problems I had is that I couldn't find a lot of people telling me the stuff that was really affecting me. I think we're all adults. We're some of us may not be. You may be a teenager, but you know we're young women and we have bodies, and our bodies are affected by this condition. And if we never go there with the conversation, then you might be sitting there wondering if something's normal. And I can tell you it probably is normal, and it's probably something that I've experienced before as well. So at times I might go into slightly more graphic detail about things than you'd like me to go into, but if that's not your thing and that's not something you want to hear about, then by all means switch to another part of the video. Again, I won't know that. And I think there's something to be said for, you know, the things that I found missing, which, you know, was that kindness and empathy. You know, this is, lots of people unfortunately have disappointed me with their reaction to what's going on in my life. You know, there's been some really good friends who I was really surprised at, you know, people that were really not much more than acquaintances that I blurted things out to that have been really, really good. And there's been other people that are really, really close to me that I have to say I've been very disappointed at either the lack of empathy or the lack of kind of wanting to be there for me, really. I'm somebody that gives a lot in my relationships, and I've helped a lot of friends out in life, and I've always been there for other people, and it's quite hard when that isn't always returned. And I think anybody that's been through something difficult like this will tell you that these kind of experiences really show you who's there and who's not going to be there, and who gets it and who doesn't get it. And you know, you live and you learn, and I'm still in the process of trying to kind of filter out people and things that haven't been helpful for me. I'm still not there yet, but I'm trying to be a little bit more selfish these days and a little bit more focused on what helps me, because I've done the being there for everybody else thing for years and years and years, and now it's time to be there for myself a little bit. So hopefully this channel will help me do that as well. So it might help me just as much as it helps you. I think there are some underlying assumptions about anything. Obviously we know that premature menopause is a huge subject, but I know that one of the major things that have really upset me, and what will probably be a big thing for you, is the infertility side of things. It's a massive area. We'll keep coming back to it in my videos. It won't kind of, you know, just be one neat video. It will keep coming up all the time. But as you may know, there is a huge world out there of oh, hang on a second, 1 minute. Hang on. Sorry, randomly some weird Lego advert popped up on my internet, which is why I just stopped there. So, oh, what was I saying? Yeah, so there's a whole world of infertility information out there. There's no shortage of people out there who, you know, will post things about infertility. The problem I find is, even in that world of people that are supposedly, you know, trying to be supportive, there are some underlying assumptions there that are sometimes not helpful. So I found that the underlying assumption was that if you're infertile, you're in a relationship with somebody that also wants children, is also on the same page. So despite this bad thing happening to you, you're in it together. Firstly, not everybody that will find out about premature menopause and about their infertility will even be in a relationship. There will be some single people out there, and I think the assumption sometimes is that if you're single, it doesn't affect you in the same way, or it's not as present. Actually, it can be more present for people sometimes, because if they're not in a relationship, not only do they haven't even met or been in the relationship with somebody they might want to have children with, but also, you know, they don't have that starting point. Also, for people like me, one of the really difficult things I've had to kind of trying to work through is that my partner is about, well, I don't know a percentage, but it's highly unlikely that he'll ever want children. So I've had this kind of double impact of kind of, you know, okay, I've got this diagnosis which really affects my fertility, and everything is telling me, oh, that's okay because you can adopt, or you can have an egg donor, or you can go through IVF, and all those things are true. But if I also have to deal with the fact that it's not very likely to happen within my life, That's another thing to have to process, and the assumption usually is that at least that's in place, and actually for people like me it's not necessarily, which makes it really difficult. I also found that although there is one book that I found on premature menopause by somebody called Dr. Catherine Petras, I think it might be, you'll find it on Amazon, it's called the Premature Menopause book, I think. It was helpful. It was probably the only book out there on premature menopause that I could find. And I'm not taking away from this experience at all, so there is no competition in these things, but what I would say is that actually even some of the premature menopause literature is heavily based around people that are kind of late 30s, early 40s who have had menopause prematurely, and that, you know, I'm not taking away from how traumatic that is at all. But there is something missing for people in their 20s that, you know, I still don't feel like I'm really being spoken to with what's out there. So I think, you know, I want this channel to be a way of addressing some of those things and filling in some of those gaps. I think there's a place for it. So if, you know, let's try and use this as a way to help each other. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about, sorry, I have notes because I'm going to forget things otherwise. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my story and how things got to this point really for me. So let's go back to tell you my story. I have to begin with the time when I didn't know I was going through menopause. So I was around 23, I was renting somewhere with my boyfriend, and I'd recently started a new job. Unfortunately, at the time I was having a lot of problems at work. I'm a very placid, passive person, and somebody at work was the complete opposite. She was very aggressive, being very volatile towards me and about me when I hadn't done anything wrong, and she just didn't like me working with her basically, and not being in control at work. That was having a really huge impact on how I felt at the time. I was incredibly anxious, incredibly depressed. Not quite as depressed as I have been recently at times, but it was probably one of the worst points in my life in terms of how bad I felt. I wasn't really wanting to get out of bed or do anything. My mood was all over the place, and I genuinely thought that everything I was experiencing was a bit weird and a bit strange, but that it was all linked to that situation. I'm sure that situation didn't help, but I don't think I would have felt the way I was if I didn't realise that actually at the time I was going through menopause. So around that time, it was actually the crux of when things really became very severe was in the winter time, and it was really cold outside, but I was feeling boiling hot all the time, and I was sleeping in next to nothing because I was so hot, and I was having these night sweats where I was really, really sweating, like all of the bed would be all disgusting and damp and horrible, and I was having to, the flat that I lived in at the time had a door that you could, a back door that opened from the bedroom, and I was having to open that wide in the middle of the night. You know, my poor boyfriend, you know, I was opening that up because I was so hot, and again, probably gross, but at work I was, you know, yeah, I work in London, I was travelling on the tubes, and it wasn't pleasant at the best of times, but in the middle of winter, I was so hot that I was getting into work like stinking of BO, just feeling gross, disgusting, my clothes sticking to me, hot flushes, very tearful, very anxious. Didn't feel I could be myself in any situation. I felt like I always had to put on a bit of an act at work. Really horrendous. I also had an experience when I was, I don't know, maybe about 24, 25, where I thought I was pregnant. I was feeling very sick, very dizzy. I just felt like perhaps it was a possibility. And I had a pregnancy test that, you know, I'd had scares before, and it didn't, you know, it always was absolutely fine. There was never anything to worry about. And then it came back on one of those digital pregnancy tests that I was 2 to 3 weeks pregnant. And obviously you can imagine, you know, I was very shocked. I was sort of, part of me was excited, part of me was very worried, because me and my partner weren't in a situation where we could have really brought a baby into the world, even though I would have done anything I could have done. And at the time the doctor couldn't, you know, I went to the doctors, I was really worried. he actually confirmed that there was no way I was pregnant. There was not the hormones present in my urine that there should have been. Nothing else was consistent with me being pregnant, and other pregnancy tests were negative. And that for ages was this experience that was really traumatic and also very confusing for me, and I had to accept that I would never really know what the explanation for that was. So this whole time I'd been on the contraceptive implant a couple of times. So the way the contraceptive implant works is it's for 3 years. It's inserted into your arm, and it was something that I was quite familiar with. I'd had it 2 or 3 times before, and it was coming to the end, you know, when it was due to be taken out. So I had it taken out, and I knew that this whole time when I was on the implant for 3 years I hadn't had any periods, and I didn't think anything of that because I was under the understanding that most people that are on the implant don't get periods, and actually I now know that the majority of people do get periods on it. But that, you know, that hadn't rung any alarm bells for me at all, because that was what I expected to happen. It got to about 3 months after my implant was taken out and I still hadn't had a period, and actually, although I know they took a little while to settle down, the GP had said to me that actually they should return fairly quickly. Within a couple of 1 or 2 months you should definitely have had a period. So I started, and I don't think I really, you know, I didn't think it was pregnancy, I didn't think it was that, I just didn't really know what was happening. I went to the doctors. At this point I was a little bit kind of, okay, this is a bit weird, still wasn't fully scared or anything, I was just a bit worried. He said that he agreed that it was a little bit unusual, but he said because I'd had the implant for so long it was, you know, worth giving it another couple of months, which I did. I then went back to the doctor again, and at that point he said, okay, look, we need to do some blood tests, we need to kind of check your hormone levels, see if there's anything that needs investigating. Then got those test results back. Now at the doctors, in theory, they are, I think, well, my doctors have always been that if you ring up and you're waiting for test results but there's nothing that you need to know about them, then they can say to you everything's fine. I rung up, the receptionist said everything was fine apart from a slight result on my thyroid test, which she said they were recommending I go and see the doctor about. So I kind of thought, okay, so maybe, you know, I'd read that thyroid can have a bit of an impact on periods. So I wasn't overly worried. I knew that a couple of people in my family had underactive thyroid, so I thought, okay, maybe it's something to do with that. But then when I went to the doctor, she said to me, you know, I'm not really sure why they told you that, because actually it does appear that there's something not quite right with your ovaries, they don't seem to be working. Now this was my first experience of what's wrong with the way that so many GPs provide very sensitive information. For a start, it was a 10-minute appointment. I felt very much rushed. I wasn't given really any information. She delivered it in a very clinical way. I just remember her saying, your ovaries aren't working. She didn't appear to have read my file very thoroughly before I came in, so I got the impression that she was kind of scrambling around, you know, and didn't really have the background, which made me feel a bit awkward. I did have it in my head to ask for the blood test results, because a part of me thought, oh, I can kind of look up online what's going on here, and she printed me out something, which I'll come back to that, but at that point she suggested that, you know, okay, we need to look at what's going on. Didn't really tell me much more than that, but I kind of got the message that something was wrong with my ovaries, and she recommended that I book myself in for an appointment with a local hospital, which I did, which was the Royal Free Hospital in North West London. So I asked for this printout of these blood test results, and it quite clearly stated on there results consistent with premature ovarian failure. At that point I fell apart, because I wasn't stupid. I hadn't heard of that before, but I knew that that would probably mean something to do with fertility, and that it was probably a bit serious. I was really, really upset and crying. I took the blood test results home, and I was just devastated, because I didn't really know anything, and obviously I did too much, me being me, did too much online research, started to make the link between that and the lack of fertility thing, and got really worried. Then in around May 2014, I went to the Royal Free Hospital, and actually I had generally, considering how awful the news was, I had a fairly sympathetic doctor who basically filled in the gaps for me. So she confirmed, I should mention this, the endocrinology department. She confirmed to me that it was premature menopause and explained a little bit more about what that meant. Particularly mentioned about HRT and about the infertility thing, and kind of confirmed that my hormone levels were so high that I was postmenopausal. It had already happened, I wasn't in the process, it had essentially happened, and that I wouldn't be able to conceive children naturally. I would probably be able to carry them because my womb health was probably fine, although they would test for that, but that wouldn't be an option. And to give her credit, she did suggest that I come back in 2 weeks and we would discuss HRT then, because she obviously understood that this was a big kind of announcement to make to somebody, and wanted to give me some time to kind of absorb that news. And I thought that she, out of all of the people I've met, she was probably the best one in terms of kind of medical support. But I wasn't given any leaflets, I wasn't given any information on how the fertility side of it worked. I wasn't really, I was directed to the Daisy Network website, which I'll talk about later, but I didn't feel like I'd come away with many answers. And that kind of escalated for a long period of time. Lots of instigated lots of tests, blood tests, things that confirmed the same thing really. I had a transvaginal ultrasound, which confirmed that my ovaries were very small and they were shriveled. Sorry, that probably sounds very harsh, but that's the way that they described it. And there was, that basically confirmed that there was no chance that my ovaries were functioning. Now, at this point, I should say that my understanding, and you would definitely be advised to find out what the situation is for you. My understanding is that if you're in premature menopause or you have premature ovarian failure, it is not necessarily the case that you're completely incapable of becoming pregnant naturally. It's still highly unlikely, but there are people who have the condition who do release an egg every few months or erratically, and there is the possibility. So don't necessarily take from my story that this will be the case for you. The reason why it was for me is because my ovaries, presumably because I was actually at postmenopausal stage, it was completely, it had happened. There isn't any chance that there are no egg follicles either. I had an egg follicle as part of the transvaginal ultrasound, which I would recommend you get if you haven't. They can tell you more about your egg follicles, whether you've got any, so you can kind of get a sense of whether there are any eggs left. You can also have a look at your womb health, which will determine whether your womb is healthy enough to at least carry a baby. I was lucky that my womb health is fine, so I can carry a pregnancy through IVF or egg donation, but I can't actually, my body can't make a pregnancy itself. But I did learn that I have no egg follicles left, so I felt pretty devastated, obviously. I had a bone scan, so again, something we'll talk about in more detail, but one of the ramifications of premature menopause is that because you're not getting anywhere near the level of estrogen that you need naturally at your age, particularly in your 20s, and because estrogen is linked to bone health, you are at a heightened risk of osteoporosis or osteopenia or bone density problems. So I did have a bone scan, and that's something that you may be getting as well, which confirmed that luckily, actually, considering the amount of time I'd gone without enough estrogen for, I'm lucky that I haven't got osteoporosis. I have some osteopenia, which is like the precursor to osteoporosis, in my back and in my hips. Luckily they were quite on it in that respect, and they gave me some calcium, and as well as the HRT. I haven't had another bone density scan. I'm due one in about 6 months, so hopefully that will give me an idea of whether any of that really worked. But luckily I wasn't at a stage where that had progressed too much, which is good. And I have had some knee and back troubles that I'll probably come back to in another video, that I feel are probably linked to do with bones, but I'm not a medical expert. But overall, that side of things doesn't feel too bad for me. So since then, things have been, I'll be honest, things have been awful. I feel like I've changed into a different person. I feel like I'm not the person that I used to be. I used to be generally, I mean, it's funny with me because I'm somebody that's quite prone to depression. I've had depression throughout my life, and it's hard for me to say that because I always feel like I'm exaggerating things, but actually no, I have had depression, and I've had it very badly sometimes. But I also am somebody that laughs and jokes a lot and feel very upbeat, and since then I felt like I've gone through a real journey, particularly relating to how any HRT at that time was affecting me, when my moods have been very bad, affected my relationship massively, not least because of the issue between us about whether we're having children, which is something that I'll talk about again another time in more detail. I felt isolated. I felt that nobody really is out there that really understands how I feel. I haven't been able to get information, so I felt very frustrated. I've been disappointed with people. I feel like people in my life who I've thought I could really depend on have let me down with things, insensitive things they've said or done, or just generally not being there for me when I really thought that they would be. So I feel like I'm going through a bit of a process of trying to work out how to manage things. I mean, I feel somewhat better than I did when I was diagnosed, but I actually would say that for me there was an instant reaction and a delayed reaction. So I had what I thought was the reaction to the news quite early on. I was crying, I was really upset, but I actually think that it's only really been in the last 6 months or so that things have fully hit, particularly with the fertility side of things have really hit me to the point where I'm having what I would call a real reaction. So they're kind of, I'm actually facing up to what this reality is, and I've had to have some awful conversations with my partner and stuff, and that have left me feeling worse. And so I wouldn't say at the moment I'm feeling massively better. Having said that, I've had a lot of problems with HRT. I've been on about 3 or 4 or even 5 different types of HRT, all of which have had some really difficult symptoms. I've been changed fairly recently to a new regime, which I'll talk about in another video, and I feel at the moment, early days, about 1.5 months in with that might be the right balance for me. But again, it's early days, so it's really hard to tell. But so it's been a real roller coaster in terms of getting medication right. The fertility thing has been a huge issue that I'm not cured of at all. I don't think I ever will be, really. I think it's just a case of trying to get some sense of, what I think the thing for me is that I just don't know. I don't have any answers. I don't feel I'm having a lot of choice or control over things at the moment. I feel a lot of control has been taken away from me in that respect. So I don't really feel like I can sit there and kind of make an informed decision about what I want in my life, because it doesn't really feel like it's my choice. So there's been lots of impact. So there's been lots of problems with medication, with my mood. It's affected in ways that even my friends might not realise, but it has affected my friendships because I've learnt to see people in a different way. It's amplified patterns that were there with my friendships already, but seem more apparent now. So people that were always a little bit crap and not necessarily the most amazing friends in the world, it has shown them to not be great and to kind of not really get it. I think you'll find that there are people that get it and people that don't get it. There are people that try and make mistakes sometimes, but I prefer those people to those that just aren't there for you at all. There's some really insensitive behaviour I've had to deal with from people that are really close to me that I've really struggled with, and that's something I feel really passionate about, is educating people on what is and isn't helpful. And that's one of the hardest things, is that people suddenly, anybody with infertility, but anybody with any kind of condition will probably tell you that once you tell people about that condition, people suddenly become experts on your health, your body, your choices, and I identify as a feminist, and I do truly believe that there is a problem in this society and in relationships with the women's body not being their own. We live in a world where people feel ownership over our bodies and over our choices, and what's good for us and what our role in life should be, and what we should and shouldn't want, and what needs conflict with each other, and whether we can work and be a parent, and what conditions there need to be a parent. And you're also told, I find, that your emotion, people try to regulate what they think your emotion should be. So I don't know whether it's out of awkwardness sometimes, but sometimes it's just frustration. Other people don't want to feel your pain and don't want to be dragged down by your pain. So people are very quick to, as I said at the beginning, I feel like the underlying message with a lot of people is, yes, this is rubbish, but you kind of need to get over it. And I've actually been told by a doctor on one occasion that the sooner you get over it, the better. I don't think it helps people. It certainly didn't help me, that kind of mentality. People get frustrated. They get frustrated that things aren't changing, and people put their own time frames on what they think you should be experiencing. So I find that people will allow you a certain amount of brief time, but then very quickly expect you to get over it. And to a certain extent, that's because that's not their real life. I always think of it as, this is something, if I think about something sad that would happen to one of my friends, I'm a really compassionate person and I have a lot of empathy for people. But even I would get to a point, I suppose, where, not that I would always be there to listen to them, but I suppose, if it's not happening in your life, you move on. You think about it being sad when you think about it, but it's not a part of your daily life. Whereas when it's you, it's real life. And that was the really difficult thing for me with premature menopause, is that it's not visible. I can't see from the outside that I'm in premature menopause. I can't tell if the next person down the road is, but it's there and it's very real. It has a very real physical and emotional impact that goes a long way beyond what a lot of people would realise. I find that if you're in your 20s, people make an assumption about how much time you have to figure things out, and don't generally take some of your concerns about fertility as seriously, because you're considered to be young enough to not need to worry about it all right now. People just don't really get it, I think, and it's really hard. And to a certain extent, you are on a journey on your own, because nobody knows how you feel inside your own head, how it feels for you, what hurts you. And it's very isolating, because people that you're very close to, it might be your partner, it might be your parent, it might be brother or sister, it might be a really close friend, will never truly know how that feels. And because of that, people will do and say things that are just not helpful or sensitive or actually very nice. And I'm sure there are times people will tell you that you just need to move on and just be positive. And I really want to fight against that, because that's been a massive factor in why I feel I haven't moved on as much as I could have done in my own journey, is because I've been too busy worrying about where I need to be in relation to other people and where they want me to be. And what I finally realised is it's okay to be where I am. It's okay to still be feeling shit 18 months down the line. That is a completely normal reaction. My counsellor has helped me to see that is in line with lots of the grief processes that people go through, and that's not abnormal at all. There is no timeline for grief. There's also, you've got to remember, it's your body. Nobody else has to go to bed. Even your partner doesn't have to go to bed at night and know that that's happening to their body, and that's happening to them and their mood and changing who they are. Nobody else has to deal with that. So if you're the person dealing with it, you have every right to take as long a time as you need, and get the information you need and have the conversations you need to have to get the information that you need to kind of move on. I also don't really believe in this, and people have different opinions about this, but I don't believe in this mentality that you move on from something hard in life. I've never found that there's a point where you say, okay, I'm over that. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be something that's with you all of your life. But the question will be, I guess, how much it impacts on your day-to-day life, how well you are able to manage that. The choices that you have available to you are a huge part of recovery. So if you feel that you are listened to, that you are heard, that you have all of the choices that you'd want and all of the options you'd want open to you to be able to get through things like the infertility issue, you will get there. My problem at the moment is that I don't feel that I have all of the options that I want in my life, and so I feel a bit trapped, but I'm sure I will get there as well. But don't let other people, if I had one message for anybody, it would be, do not let other people project their point of view on you. You are you, your infertility is yours, your menopause is yours, and it doesn't matter that you're in your 20s, it doesn't matter, you know, that you do have more time supposedly than other people to get your fertility decisions in order. It doesn't matter, it's still a very, very difficult time, and it also doesn't matter if you previously thought you didn't want children or you don't want children. That doesn't matter either. Again, don't let people, you know, fertility thing may not be an issue to you, don't make it an issue if it isn't. It also is okay that your point of view might have changed since finding out about your diagnosis. It might be that because of your diagnosis it's made you reevaluate what you want. You've realised you do want children, and it's okay, you know, just because you've said to people before you don't want children, don't let people say, oh, you never wanted them anyway. We will do a video on things that people say that really wind me up, because it's been a huge theme in my life that people have imposed their points of view on me. But all I would say is don't let that define you. I think you need what you need, you know. So what have I found helpful? So one website I mentioned earlier on is the Daisy Network. Now, personally, I don't make that much use of it because I found other things that I found the most helpful for me. But the Daisy Network is the main, or the only probably, charity for premature menopause in the UK. And it has a website. You can also pay a very small fee per year, I think it is. I think it might be like £10 per year to become a member, and by becoming a member you get access to the forums. I don't find the forums to be very active. I always find that not many people use that part of the website, but it might have changed. There's lots of really good information out there that kind of demystifies some of the stuff that you're being told at the moment. The really good thing is if you're a member you get newsletters regularly, and you also they do, I believe, have kind of annual conferences, and unfortunately I missed last year's one because I couldn't go, but I would like to go to the next one. And the other thing they do is they give you a bundle of information about kind of recommended books, literature. There's some stuff, fact sheets about things, fact sheets about other people in your family that you can give to kind of tell them a little bit more about what you're going through. Really, really good. The other thing I found really helpful is Facebook groups. So Facebook groups aren't necessarily, you have to be a bit careful with them. So you have to make sure that when you're accessing them not feeling too, I think if you're feeling incredibly depressed, they can sometimes make you feel worse. But generally I find them helpful, but you just have to kind of try and remember that sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming actually. I would say that there are lots of, the three main groups I go to, I think there's one called Infertility Support, I put it in my description of my channel anyway, Infertility Support Network or something, Infertility UK. There's one called Premature Ovarian Failure, It's Not Your Mark, there's Menopause, and there's one called Premature Menopause. I find them really helpful because people reflect their own experiences, ask questions, support one another, also celebrate things when things have gone well. I generally find people are very supportive on there. Those have been the most helpful thing for me. If I had to say my experience, it would be that I find the premature menopause or the POF kind of forums and pages better and more helpful than the ones that are kind of generic infertility pages. And that's because, firstly, obviously premature menopause is not just about infertility, it's also about some of the physical and the emotional kind of areas that don't really fall into that. Also, it can at times be a little bit difficult to look at an infertility group, partly because everything's very clinical and very kind of about injecting lots of hormones and stuff, and it's all very technical, lots of jargon, and I actually don't always understand everything. And I think if you're somebody that's just been diagnosed, it might actually be quite daunting to have to listen to all of that stuff. It's a bit it can be a bit overwhelming, and also it can be hard because you may need or have to witness seeing posts about people that have successfully become pregnant, which in some ways can be hopeful and helpful, but in other ways, if you're somebody like me that knows that, oh sorry, not that, but it's kind of it can be a little bit like a bit baby focused, and I think if you're, even if the message is, look, you know, we had infertility and we've managed to have a baby, it can sometimes, that's not the way your brain will process it, and it will just feel like a lot of baby information, and we all know how often that comes up in our day-to-day lives. So pick them wisely, but I would say that on the whole they're very supportive, and they're also a way of getting very real world information about what POF or premature menopause really is like. Other things I found helpful, there are a couple of fertility fairs that I've been to which have really helped me. So I've been to the fertility show before. I didn't make it this year because my partner was ill and sadly we couldn't go, but can't recommend it enough. It is a bit overwhelming because it's obviously all about having babies and all of that kind of stuff, but there really is one of the only places I found really good targeted information about premature menopause, because that's one of the conditions, one of the main conditions people will have connected to infertility. So there's lots of you feel like when you walk in the room, even though there's lots of this baby stuff going on and there is salespeople and all of that, you actually feel like, oh, I'm in a room full of people that have some understanding of how I'm feeling about things. So the sensitivity around that's quite good. There's lots of talks about things, so it's not just about you want to have a baby in the next 5 minutes. You will get lots of leaflets about egg donation and IVF and things, but it's more just to, you know, there's some talks about some really important topics. It helps you kind of think about your fertility options, and that in itself is really helpful. And what I did is I put that information in a bag away, and I sometimes look at it and sometimes I put it away again, but it just helps me keep a bit of hope. It can be quite good for helping your partner to understand some of the issues, and if they don't have a very good understanding of how fertility treatment works, it can give them a little bit of an insight as well. Yeah, so I found them helpful. There's also something called the Alternative Parenting Show, which I've thought about going to before, which is quite targeted to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, LGBT community, but it's also for heterosexual couples as well. But that is again kind of another show based around different ways to become a parent. So I don't want to reduce this experience just to infertility, because that is not the whole experience. But if you're looking for things to help you find some answers, those are some really useful things. Finally, I would say counselling. I've been seeing a counsellor for ever since sort of May, when I was diagnosed, really. It's probably no surprise to many of you that I wasn't offered counselling on the NHS. I wasn't given any offer of any kind of support like that at all. My understanding is that clinically, in terms of best practice, they should be offering you that support, and they shouldn't be refusing you that support if you ask for it. One of my regrets is that I didn't kind of push that as much as I should have done at the time, probably because I wasn't in the headspace to do it. And you know, not all of us have thousands of pounds in the bank to go and access private therapy. So what I would say is, if you aren't offered that support, ask. You shouldn't have to ask, you really shouldn't have to ask, but because it's so often not forthcoming, do make sure that you kind of prepare some of the questions that you've got and ask what counselling support you can access. In the end, I found my own private counsellor. Now, what I'd say is I'm not somebody that earns a lot of money. I've had to make quite a big financial sacrifice to be able to do that. So it might sound trivial, but I never, hardly ever buy myself things for myself anymore, like clothes or anything like that, because my money gets sucked up by all the other direct debits I pay for, and now this. But I see it as a worthwhile sacrifice. And to a certain extent, maybe it's a good thing that I managed to get my own, because what I did is I went onto a website and I found somebody that has a special interest in infertility, which means their support is quite targeted to what I'm going through. The lady I see is really, really helpful, really, really good. And I think it's been invaluable, and it's been the only real place that I can be very honest and open about how I'm feeling, and it's really helped me. I have a fortnightly appointment and I pay £35 for an hour, so it's not cheap, it's not really cheap, but by the same token it could be a lot worse. Therapy can be kind of as cheap as or as expensive as you want it to be, but generally speaking, at least in the south, I think the average for a counsellor is around £30 to £50 an hour. Many people, when you see them, if they're decent therapists and you have a conversation with them about finances and affordability, most therapists will be able to kind of make a slight reduction for you, so don't kind of completely discount them. It might be worth having a bit of a conversation with them about what you can afford and see if there's anything they can do for you. A good website to find some information about available therapists is the BACP website, which is the British Association, I think, or Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists, and it's the governing body for counsellors in the UK. So while be careful, because not all counsellors have to have this accreditation, but most do, because it's really best practice. So you should normally be able to search for your local area for somebody who specialises in this sort of issue, or something very similar, and go along and talk to them. And it might be that you find that it's less time limited, it's more targeted to you when you know you've chosen that person yourself, really. So that would be my recommendation, is, you know, have a think about what your options are, but therapy can be really helpful. There is some support groups around from an infertility point of view. So infertility wise, the Infertility Network organised some really good meetups. I have been to one in London and it was really good, but the problem I had is that it wasn't very accessible for me after work, but I might start going again. So there were some really good meetups happening around London. If you go to the Infertility Network page, you should be able to find out a bit more in your local area. I believe the Daisy Network themselves, I'm not sure if they organise their own meetups. There was a mention of Guy's and St Thomas's having like a meetup, I think once a month, but the problem, I think, is that it's during work hours. But if you don't work, or if you work kind of flexible hours, you might be able to go along to that, even if it was once or twice. And there seems to be a support network specifically for premature menopause, and that's something I'm thinking of accessing this year, probably something more targeted. So yeah. So again, like the infertility ones, you will generally find that most people there are people that are actively going through IVF. So you may find all the baby talk quite daunting, and people might not be quite in the same place that you are. But it's still good to go, and I think any information that you can gain from that's really useful. I think I'll leave it there for my introduction video. It's probably been a lot of information to take in, and I'm aware that I'm nearly at the hour mark. I'm sorry if this video was very long and felt quite arduous, but it's important, I think, to go into the details sometimes. So that's my journey, that's how I came to be diagnosed with premature menopause, a little bit about the impact that it's had on my life and what my personal circumstances are. I'd be really interested to hear more about you. Please do comment, subscribe, share your thoughts, feedback. Any questions that you have, I'll try and always look before I post the next video and see if I can tell you from my perspective. What I would say to you is that it's not really a YouTube channel to get information, as in I'm going to be going off giving you kind of medical or clinical information. It's more about it's a little bit more about kind of support and kind of the everyday experience as a person on a personal level of what premature menopause is like. It could be things from, you know, how do you cope when somebody asks you if you're having children, to what do you do about your hot flushes, or anything like that. You know, we can talk about all that stuff. Otherwise, my general plan is to kind of pick an overall topic for the video each time, and we will kind of focus on that topic. Not sure what's going to be next yet, but I'll see. And as I say, I can't promise about frequency. I'm quite busy at the moment. With my cross-stitch channel, if you watch it, you'll notice that I sometimes do go months without posting. I'd like not to go months. I'd like to at least get a minimum of kind of once per month at least. But I will try as much as I can to get a video on here as often as I can. I can be a bit slow to reply to comments, but I will try and reply to everything that I receive. I'll try to keep an eye on things, but bear with me if it is a few days or weeks, because there are periods of time where it's quite difficult for me to get online and get anything done. But anyway, I hope you found this really helpful. This is the Premature Menopause Project. Make it part of your project, spread the word about the channel, spread your experiences, think about starting your own vlog. We can be in this together. I'm really passionate about helping people with this, and I hope I have done a little bit. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.